Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Can you believe we're at the final part of the book? Wow, this has been a journey. I started off with me not liking the book because it was a long book. I just don't like reading. But damn, this turned out really good. Wow. Let's see how the story wraps up. Chapter 15. The Major waved his hand towards the approaching shoreline, but his voice was drowned out by the noise from the helicopter that suddenly appeared above us, like a bird of ill omen. The Major looked up, and he took out his radio and put it to his ear. When he finished speaking, his face had a satisfied grin. "Be prepared for what we are about to see. Reykjavik is now mostly ashes and rubble, bombed by the gun helicopter over there. Not a hut is left standing. What of the people? Most of them would still be there, I suppose. But I expect a lot of casualties, unavoidable, of course. There's a war zone. Look, you can see the smoke from here." We descended from the boat into the restless water on the shore. There was a line of soldiers in battle gear, pointing their guns at us. They led us towards the trees and then the field of rubble, which I saw was all I was left of the sculpture garden. Memory is nothing but a view through a car window, fast changing, impressionistic. Of all the things that I saw today and all the words that I heard, what made the most impression was the sight of the broken statues, the arms and legs and heads sundered from the body. I recall a face, its expression of terror so lifelike, the eyes so mobile, staring up at me as I passed, its nose broken, its mouth half open and eager to share its secret. And later, when I voiced my lament to Naman, "Look, they broke the statues," he smiled sadly and nodded and said, "Everything that was made must one day cease to be. It's the nature of existence." Damn. The fight was over when we got off the boat, but the earth was still smoldering with the remains of the battle. The huts still gave out smoke. The soldiers still fired guns sporadically into the air as they corralled the villagers into one big clearing, trying to determine who among them was a militia and who wasn't. I couldn't recognize the hut where we once slept and the log on which I once sat. Zack sat down heavily on the first surface he found. I couldn't sit. I mingled with the worshippers, trying to see if I could find a similar face, Gloria or Naman. And yes, here was a familiar face, even though half of it was swollen and covered with blood. It was a man who had been seated with Gloria and Naman, eating dinner. If I hadn't been looking keenly, peering almost rudely into the faces, I wouldn't have recognized him. He once pure white robe was now specked with the green of crushed leaves and the rust of red blood, and the one side of his face capable of expression looked vacant, vague, tired, like a man after a long trek, thirsty, but unsure of where to look for water or rest. When I stopped next to him and took his hand and introduced myself, he licked his chapped lips and tried to smile. "Ah, the reporter. What are you doing here? This place is very dangerous for you. You shouldn't have returned. Where's Gloria and Naman?" He pointed vaguely and continued walking, his eyes looking around for something in the rubble. A woman took me to Naman. He was surrounded by a group of women, all weeping, holding one another, and he went to one another, calming them down. I shook his hand, and he told me to sit beside him. Like the others, his white robe was covered in blood. Maybe his, maybe not. I couldn't think of anything to say. I pointed. The statuary is all gone. It's the nature of existence. A thing is created, it blooms for a while. If it's capable of blooming, then it ceases to be. He said that 2 days ago the militians had arrived. The worshippers were as usual having their morning dip, chanting their hymns to the sun, and the next thing they knew they were surrounded by gunmen. Of course they'd been visited by the militias before, but nothing like this. Usually they came for food, or for medical supplies, or for clothes. Once they attempted to abduct the woman, worshipper, but Naaman had stood in front of them and the woman, and said he had to shoot him first, and of course, when their leader, the real professor, who was a gentleman, found out, he had publicly punished the militians and personally apologized to the community. A good man, the real professor. But this time it was another leader, a younger one, and he gathered everyone into the worship hut, and he said he wanted all the worshippers to show allegiance to him. Imagine that. When Naaman said that wasn't really necessary, the man placed a gun on his chest and told him to shut up. When he said he discovered that the traitors and informants had been giving information to the soldiers, someone here at the shrine on the island must have given them away to the soldiers just before they arranged to meet with the reporter on Nagbuki. He said he and his men would spend the night here, and tomorrow they'd be on their way. But before they left for they left, they'd take a hostage just to make sure the worshippers' cooperation. And he pointed at Gloria and said, "You will come with us tomorrow." But the soldiers came early the next morning. First, they came in a boat, and there were only 5 of them. They were on routine patrol. They hadn't known the militians were there, and they ran into an ambush. It was a massacre. They were all killed instantly. The militians had machine guns and grenades, but the soldiers must have called for backup because this morning the helicopter came and started shooting at everything beneath it indiscriminately. People running and jumping into the water. It was awful, awful. The water turned red blood. It was blood. In the confusion, the rebels slipped away and left the villagers to face the soldiers. Now see, everything is in ruins. Nothing left. It is a miracle. So many are still alive. A miracle. He kept repeating it. He kept repeating it. A miracle. And Gloria, where is she? They took her away like they promised. She was crying and screaming, but they dragged her away. I went over to Zach. The lady was here just now, looking for you. She said she was your sister. Do you have a sister? Bulma? Here? Zach looked about, raising his head from the grass. He was exactly where I had left him over 2 hours ago, in the grass under the tree, but now he was fully stretched on his back. His head popped up on a tree's protruding root. I took her. I told her to walk about, that you were somewhere around here. Maybe she's with the woman over there. I wasn't sure what to make of that news. What would Bulma be doing here? How did she get here? I left Zach and headed for that group of women. The camp segregated itself, with the men on one side closer to the water, and the women camped where the tree line began. The women were seen in groups. The ones fit tending to the wounded, while the children crawled between their legs, rolled about in the grass, oblivious to the moment's gravity. In the outskirts of the 2 groups were the soldiers, their guns raised, their eyes alert to any movement over the water. I found her sitting by herself on a log, looking absently at 2 urchins wrestling in the grass. She had a smile on her face, and she looked pretty. I was looking at the good side of her face, and suddenly, I was back many years to the last time I seen her like this, without a scar. I had returned from Port Hardcore after my apprenticeship with Adu photos. Bulma and John had started going out then, and they were already talking of getting married someday. John had pointed at the entire town of Junction with his hand. But we have to get out of here first. One day I left. John and Bulma had walked me to the bus station, and as the bus pulled away, Bulma waved, and the sun fell on her smooth face, just as it fell now, smooth and unmarred. What are you doing here? I know. Don't tell me. You're hoping to find John in the forest waiting for you. My voice rose as I spoke. I felt it rising higher and higher. I pointed out. Look, they're fighting a war here. You can get killed, Bulma. And all for what? A man who walked on you because you couldn't bear to look at your face in anymore? Time to move on. He's never coming back. He's gone. Accept it. She was staring at me, her head inclined as she were watching a stranger. But I was remorseless. I was tired, and all I wanted was to be as far away from here as possible. But her presence only added to the weight on my shoulders. I came to look for you, not for John. I sat down beside her. You're supposed to be gone for only a day. I went to your office to see if they had any news. They said no, nothing. And then your editor said to tell you Jay did not bother to show up at the office. He said, what? He said that? Yes. How quickly things change. It seemed only yesterday I was seated at the chairman's right hand, being toasted by the staff, and now I had no job. How long have you been here? I got here yesterday. The fighting began just after I arrived. The kids resting in the grass were now eating the same bowl placed before them by their mother, who stood watching over them as they ate. She was a tired-looking woman with her hair in knots. She held her grimy white robe bunched up into her hip, lifting it clearly off the muddy grass. Her exposed calves were thick and chunky, merging into her ankles without definition. He was worried about you. I felt tired. I felt ashamed about my outburst. I tried to joke when I saw how crestfallen she looked. I'm the lucky one, remember? Nothing will ever happen to me. Have you found the woman? What one? The white woman you were looking for? No. I met your friend Zach over there. What's wrong with him? He's not well. He's dying. He's dying? That's what the doctor said. So what are you going to do? Find no boat to take him to Port Hardcore. They'll have to evacuate these wounded people soon anyway. I sat up all night beside Zach. Bulma was curled up on her spread-out wrapper close to us, fast asleep, her head resting on her arm, her face beautiful in the glow of the fire. So when it started not too far away. My bad. I listened to the anxious murmurs of the men around the fire as they sat hunched forward, still in their white frocks. Some of them would look up and stare at me. I looked back at them, my face full of questions, but I only got silent head shakes. Some shrank from me as though I were an interrogator, brandishing tools for torture. For the woman's dissection came the cries and whimpers of children. From the waterfront came the crunch of soldiers' boots on the hard pebbles of the beach. I watched the fire burn bright and die. I was exhausted, but I did not sleep. Instead, I let my mind remember the many conversations we had right here on this island. One Zach had asked me, Rufus, what books have you read? I mentioned a few journalism books, but he shook his head impatiently. You must take a year off. One of these days, before you're old and tired and weighed down by responsibility, go away somewhere and read. Read all the important books, educate yourself, and you'll see the world in a different way. It was the day after he had dug up an empty grave. He had gone to sleep exhausted by the excitement. Perhaps I was right here. And the next morning, but when they opened the door, they came in very early. We didn't hear them enter, but the sun on my face woke me up. It was a wafer of a ray flattened by a narrow crack in the door that directed the sun squarely on my face. I opened my eyes then. Jesus. I opened my eyes then. Seeing the three men standing solemnly just inside the doorway, I sat up. Zach, like me, was just waking up, but already his eyes looked alert, and he was getting to his feet. It was Naaman, with two other men I had never seen before, but who, from their clothes, seemed like priests. They stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, their gravitas around them solid as rock. Naaman in the middle was tall and upright. The two others were shorter, stooped, and older. One was thin and bald, mustached, and the other was portly, and a fine head of hair. These are my fellow priests, and together we represent the entire community. Zach stood up and faced him. You're welcome. But did you have to wake us up like this? You have committed a grave ill. By going to the burial ground and digging up a grave last night, you have desecrated the place. And now, hold on, what are you talking about? Who said we were at the burial ground last night? Zach tried to outstare the unblinking priest, but there was neither power nor conviction in his eyes and voice. I said nothing. I sensed a certain change in Naaman. This was the same man I talked to yesterday. He seemed more distant, sadder. Yet there was determination, a coldness I had not noticed before in him. He was here to carry out a task, and he was going to do it, although he found the task unpleasant. Now he suddenly stepped forward, and before I could draw back, he took my right hand and raised it up to Zach. I was taken by surprise and quickly curled my fingers, trying to hide the telltale red earth that my hasty washing last night had removed from under the chipped nails. Zach's stir wavered. He sighed. Well, our head priest died this morning, and now we cannot bury her because your activity last night has disrupted the balance of things. A purification ceremony has to be carried out. In the meantime, please remain in your hut. The elders will hold a meeting and decide what is to be done. We did what we did because you lied to us. Naaman turned to him fiercely. I didn't lie to you. I told you all I knew. Please stay here till we send for you. Now we're leaving today. No, we're leaving today. You can't leave till after the burial. What is the burial? After the purification ritual. And when is that? We don't know. What do you mean? We don't know how long the ritual will take. We don't know what the ritual will be because we have never been faced with such a situation before. No one has ever desecrated a grave before today. But it wasn't even his grave. There was no body in it. But if there had been a body. At the bald-headed elder spoke, his voice whispery as a ribbon of smoke. His voice was almost pleading, but in his roomy eyes there was a threat. We are having a meeting of all elders today. Please do not leave your hut till you have permission. Naaman turned to go, and then he stopped and looked at us, and then he spoke with his voice a bit softer. In any case, there will be no ferry to take you off the island. There will be no movement or activity till after the burial. The whole community will be in mourning. If we attempt to leave, we'll be stopped. How can you leave? Will you swim, Mr. Zach? We'd rather you didn't force our hands. This is a moment of great sorrow for us. And they left. Zach stood at the door, watching the men disappear into the trees. Do you think they're serious? They seem serious about the ferry not coming. He turned and sat down on his mat. After a while, he lay down on his back, facing the roof, his arms folded under his head. I sat down and tried to imitate his calm, but my mind was an ocean, choppy and turbulent and roaring with a million thoughts. My job wasn't the best in the world. I thought I should receive more recognition and encouragement for the effort and enthusiasm I put into it. But it was the only one I had, and I certainly didn't want to lose it. The only way to keep it was to get to the office as soon as I could, and suddenly I noticed the white robe over Zach's mat, hanging from a nail. He saw it and returned it. I saw myself in it, disgusted, disguised as a worshiper. Slipping unnoticed into the woods, into the path between the trees, I saw myself standing at the waterfront, waiting for the next ferry, a fishing boat, anything to take me away to Port Harcourt. Zach watched curiously as I slipped the robe over my head. I'll be back. I stepped out hesitant, but everything was as it used to be. Men and women in robes came and went. There were no sentries lurking behind trees or watching our door. Perhaps my disguise was working, or perhaps Naumann felt his warning had been strong enough to deter us from attempting to escape. I slipped unnoticed into the woods, taking the path between the tall trees and walking fast toward the waterfront. My head bowed, purposeful. But even from afar, I could see the usually busy water front was empty today. Where were the fishermen setting out or returning in their long, narrow boats, with their jute nets at their feet and their sturdy oars in their hands? And where were the women waiting to buy the fish from the water, talking to each other and the fishermen at, at the top of their voices, now bantering, now flirting, but always bargaining? There was no ferry, one to take passengers back to Port Harcourt, to the dozens of tiny islands dotting the endless water, and now appeared so daunting and so foe-like. I was a lone figure in a white robe walking on the beach, looking about, and when I finally got tired I headed back to the village center. What I needed, I realized, was an ally in an enemy camp, someone who could tell me how serious the elders were about detaining us here, how long the detention might last. Gloria. The tenement house was not far from the waterfront. Two women were standing at the front entrance, one with a plastic bucket in her hand, the other holding a baby in her arms. They moved aside as I approached, now pausing their breathless discussion. My disguise so far was holding, but Gloria's door was locked with a big Yale padlock. Zach was still lying on his back, his eyes staring at the roof when I returned. We can't get away. There are no boats coming or going. The whole village is staying home. Nothing is happening. You should rest, save your energy. But we're trapped here. We could be here for days, weeks. Nothing we could do about it. So we wait. Conserve our energy. I sat on my mat and stared at the open door. At midday, two women came in and gave us lunch, avoiding our eyes, evading our questions. At sundown, they returned with dinner. I had no appetite. I watched Zach eat boiled yam in oil with gusto. Then I slipped out again as soon as it was dark. Surely she would have heard about our situation by now. Why hadn't Gloria tried to communicate, send us a note? Perhaps she had been warned to keep away from us. I entered the woods, walking fast, almost running. As soon as out the trees, once more entering the tenement house, almost expected to find two gossiping women still standing by the entrance, but the space where they stood was now empty. The front door ajar. I went inside. The wind stopped suddenly, as it was cut off by a switch. Gloria's door was still locked. I decided to wait. For the first time, I noticed the rows of doors to my left and right. Some were half open. Sounds from radios drifted out faintly from behind flirting curtains. A door opened to my right and a woman came out, and a bucket in her hand. She glanced at me as she passed. Then she went to a corner and I heard the sound of tap water falling into a metal bucket. I turned and left. Next day, I sat on the mat, staring at Zach, saying nothing, eating. And the woman brought the food, going to the outhouse was when I was pressed. When the sun had traveled all the way across the sky, still nothing had happened. No one had come to talk to us. I lay on my back, closed my eyes. I conserved energy. As Zach had suggested, Bummel would have worried by now, wondering what would happen to me. If we were to go after the woman all the way, how could we get off the island? We don't have a boat. We don't know where the militias are camped. Perhaps I spoke out of desperation, knowing that my job might not be waiting for me when I get back to Port Harcourt, or perhaps I was swayed by Zach's promise of starting a real paper, or maybe a secret part of me had always been waiting for a chance like this. I didn't know, but suddenly I was excited. I wanted to go after the kidnapped woman and find out what really happened, to interview the professor. We have the money. Zach was smiling as he brought out his brown envelope. I'm sure he can get some local guy, some fisherman who knows his way around, and then the rest we would deal with when we come to it. But as it turned out, we didn't have to go looking for a boat. One came to us early in the morning before the cocks began to crow. There was a tentative knock on the door. Zach and I jumped at the same time, but I got there before him. I started our visitor with disappointment. It wasn't Gloria. It was an old boatman looking as unobtrusive as natural as the grass and trees looking outside. The morning light fell on his frayed homespun shirt and bare feet, and the long orange hand held against his chest. What do you want? Olga Naumann sent me. He said I'd carry you to where you want to go, but you must come quick. Zach looked, and I looked at each other, and we didn't wait for him to repeat his offer. We followed him to the boat, and soon Eureka Island was behind us, swallowed by the distance and the darkness and the mist that rose like smoke from the riverbanks. Mid-river, the water was clear and mobile, but towards the banks it turned brash and still. trapped by mangroves in those branches, and the mist hung in clumps like cotton balls. Ahead of us, the mist arched clear over the water like a bridge, sometimes entering an especially narrow channel in the river. But our wooden canoe would be so enveloped in the dense gray stuff that we couldn't see each other as we glided silently over the water. I felt Zach surreal. It felt surreal to be back again on the island, trapped again, but this time not by harmless priests and worshippers, but by the major and the soldiers. Many times in the night, Zach had woken up agitated and sweaty, looking at me as if trying to remember where he had seen me before. Then I hold his hand and shout his name, attempting to penetrate the fog in his eyes. He just looked at me, confused and teary, growing cloudier every minute. And at last, Zach went back to sleep. I let go of his hand and sat on my head bowed. I felt a cold. I felt cold and nauseous. Perhaps I was coming out with fever. I wanted to stay awake, but every so often I'd nod off, only to be jerked back to consciousness by Zach's voice, low and faint, coming from a measureless distance, asking for a drink. A drink? Just one sip. One sip, please. It'd be a miracle if he lasted the night. I felt the tiredness and hopelessness weighed down on me. Not knowing what I was doing, I turned to him and grabbed his hand, my arm shaking as badly as his. What are you doing here, Zach? It makes no sense. No sense. Toward dawn, I fell asleep. When I woke up, Zach and Emma were whispering together, and I couldn't conceal my surprise at how fresh and rested they both appeared. Zach was sitting without help and talking lucidly. He smiled at me. Hello? Hello? Where's Boma? Somewhere about. The soldiers hurried us to the water to go to our morning ablutions, and the woman behind a huge boulder away from the men. I watched the men wade in and out, dipping their faces into the water and washing under their armpits, their faces blank and their motions mechanical. Some tried to wash the blood spots off their white robes without much success. I sat with them on the beach as they waited for their robes to dry, some dressed only in their trousers and some in underpants, their eyes soft, far away. After a while I noticed that people were moving back to the campsite. Ahead a soldier was leading them forward to the major, who was making an address. He was standing on a huge, still smoldering log, looking over the heads of the people, his uniform and his boots as spotless as ever. He raised his rifle and pointed around with it, calling for silence. It has come to our attention that the militias who killed our men yesterday and who caused this massive destruction upon your island are still out there, not far from here, perhaps planning another attack. The men looked at each other wearily while the woman pulled the children closer. We're also aware that among us here there are some who are sympathetic to the militias, who are in cahoots with them. We will find you and we will deal with you. You will return fire for fire. As long as you do what we tell you, you will be safe. Nothing will happen to you. You will be confined to this island for at least 1 week. No going, no coming. You have enough food here on the island, and for those who are wounded, we have a doctor. He will be brought here today to attend to your wounds. He is good. He saved my life once when a murmur began amongst the people, and it soon turned into an uproar. The major stopped talking and looked down at the people. His men raised their rifles nervously, and the uproar died out quickly as it started. The major lowered his rifle and turned his back on the crowd. You are dismissed. You can slip away quite easily if you want to. I looked at Zach. He and Nama had been in a huddle again since we returned from listening to the major. I had been wondering what it was they were whispering about. Now I knew. Far away next to the rubble there had been a communal kitchen, a field kitchen that had been set up, supervised by women who were in turn supervised by soldiers. A line of hungry men, women, and children had formed in front of the triangular hearths. Slip away and go where? Besides, my sister's here. I have to look for her. And you, Zach, you have to go to Port Harcourt. I'll be fine. And so will your sister. The worst is over, I think. Bulma was with a group of women at the hearth. I could see her red blouse standing out in the cluster of white robes around her. She was laughing as she bustled about, organizing the children into a neat line, ladling porridge from a pot into cups and bowls. She looked really happy, and for a moment I almost started to believe that the worst really was over. What do you want me to do? It's not what we want you to do. It's what must be done. And the truth is, you're the only one in a position to do it. So what do you want me to do? Slip away, go to Port Harcourt, and tell the editors what's happening here. We're trapped here for at least a week. We heard what he said. No one out there knows what's going on. These people need help. Soon, in a day or two, they don't get it. They'll start dying. My editor won't listen to me. I've lost my job. Go to Beak. My editor. He's a resourceful person. He has his faults, and he can talk to other editors. He has a good contacts in Lagos. Tell him what's going on here. You have to do it. You have to do it now. Escaping the cab was easier than I expected. I put on a white robe Naman gave me, kept my head low, entered the woods, and went towards the cemetery. keeping half an eye on the soldiers, but none of them seemed interested in me. Only later did I discover the reason for this lack of attention. There was simply no means of leaving the island by boat. Even if one escaped the camp, the boats had been systematically riddled with bullets and holes by soldiers, and the narrow dugout canoes had been chopped to bits and were being used as firewood. I did as Naaman instructed, and once I left the cemetery, I headed north, making for the water. I swam away from the shore, and then I took a deep breath and dived. Naaman said that all I had to do was let myself be carried by the water and end up near the pier where the fishermen kept their canoes. And once in a canoe, I wouldn't take long to get to Tamuno's village, and there Chief Ibrahim would help me get to Port Harcourt. But as the diving touched the bottom, everything went dark. I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I was on shore, my legs in the water, my head in the sand, and above me the sun was harsh, burning into my face. I stood up, looking around, trying to determine where I was and how long I'd been unconscious. I dragged myself to a line of trees. To my left, I could see a fencing around the cemetery, so I had really not gone very far from the water. The pier was still way off, about a kilometer away. I decided to walk through the trees, keeping the water in view till I got to the pier. I was so hungry and weakened that I fell down, taking on a few steps. I hoped I was not coming down with the same fever as Zach, but I didn't want to think about it. Forced myself up, resumed walking, sitting down sometimes for over 30 minutes to rest my wobbly legs. As I got near to the pier, I kept my eyes open for canoes and for the soldiers who might be out there patrolling, looking for my stray villagers or invading militias. Much later, driven by hunger, I came out of the woods and headed for the village center, ducking behind a tree whenever I heard a noise. I passed houses and wide open doors through which I could see the empty compound. Some of the houses had broken walls and roofs, with smoke still issuing from the rafters, yet some were surprisingly untouched. That glorious night, I found a front door was kicked in, and now, lay beside the doorway, was a zinc sheet twisted and torn. I went in slowly, staying close to the wall, and central space was in the compound was littered and with all sorts of objects abandoned by their fleeing owners. A lady's shoe, a magazine, a shattered earthenware pot by the kitchen door. The door to Gloria's room was open, and I entered. I looked at the broken pieces from the mirror on the floor, and opened the wardrobe and the cracked window. I imagined her being dragged out by a man, and she cried and begged to be spared. I sat on the bed where we had once made love, over there, and begged to be spared. Where over there was a seat where he entertained me with a bowl of jollof rice, and the thought of food in my stomach, rumbled. My knees felt weaker, and now I knew I might have to return to trying to admit to Zach that I had failed. But first I needed rest. I lay back and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was dark. I was sweating and shaking. My mouth was dry, and I could feel a heat rising off my skin. I was definitely coming down with something. I curled up in the bed, watching the combat through the open door. I was too weak to care anymore if I was discovered by soldiers. Damn. We got time for a little bit more. Outside, the sun is bright. I'm talking to Zach in the hut. It was one of those days when he looked spry and full of energy. Did you really love Anita? Can you continue to love a person regardless of such shortcomings? Because you hope to save them, or because you can't help it? Isn't that what love is all about? Zach says nothing. He turns his face away. But just before he does, I see the pain, the bitterness on my face. The sadness seems so out of keeping with the beautiful day outside. I feel sorry. I introduce a sad note to such a glorious day, but I want to hear his answer desperately. For some reason, he speaks softly, sadly. What's the point? It's all memory now. Anita died in a detention center in London. She hanged herself in the bathroom. The news didn't make the front pages of Lagos papers. Just a single column in the back of two provincials. Voices, whispers, soldiers perhaps, then a cry of a child. I thought I was imagining it. I got off the bed and crawled on all fours to the door. It was dark, the voices were coming. One of the many broken doors, either on my right or my left. I waited, controlling my breathing. Suddenly I saw a flicker of light. Then it disappeared. Not soldiers, they were more brash and noisy than this. I set up and moved towards the room. As I got to the door, my leg kicked against an empty tin, which elicited a brief scrolling sound from my room. Then silence. Hello? Silence. Is anyone there? I'm a friend. I know you can hear me. My voice shook, my legs bowed. I had to hold on the door frame with both my hands to remain upright. I'm a friend. Coming in, here I come. It was a moonless night, and the room was nothing but vague outlines and humps. I held my breath and waited. And after a while, I heard breathing, movement, and braced myself, half expecting something to whiz out of the darkness and connect with my face. When I said, a match was struck, and a face emerged from the glow. A candle was lit. It was a man in the corner, crushed on the floor. He raised the light, moving his face sideways, trying to see my face. I stepped in, and the corner still close to my shadow. I could hear other figures moving about, staring at me. My name is Rufus. I'm alone. I spoke without thinking, trying to give as much reassuring information as possible. I couldn't see his face. He shaded the candle with his hand so that the light fell on my direction. I'm a reporter. A reporter? It seemed a man turned to look in the dark part of the room, as if to communicate his surprise to the others in the shadows. Yes, sir, I'm a reporter from Port Harcourt. What are you doing here by yourself? Now I knew he wasn't dangerous. Listen, do you have anything I can eat? I'm very hungry. He got up and disappeared behind the light. I heard whispering, a woman's voice slow. He came back with something in his hand, handed it to me. It was meat, dried, rubbery, gamey. I sat down on the floor and ate, all the while staring into the glowing, watchful eyes. When he washed, he gave me a cup of water that I drank in a single gulp. He seemed to want to get rid of me as quickly as possible, and I wasn't ready to leave him just yet. I was curious to see who was with him, and I had questions that needed to be answered, like where to find a boat. I escaped from the fighting. Who are you? A figure rose from the corner and entered the light. I saw a woman in bobo and wrapper, a head tie covering most of her face. No figures come forward. It was a whole family, a father, mother, and 3 children. The youngest, who looked about 3, was crying, her face running from tears and snot, blotchy from the insect bites and grime. The mother and children had been huddled beneath the large blanket, and now the children peered at me from outside the light's circumference. And the inspections told me they felt more pity for me than fear. They had been here a whole day now. They had locked themselves up in the toilet when the shooting began, and afterwards they had moved to this tiny room, coming out only to go to the toilet or to look for food. The husband was a tall, distracted-looking fisherman, and he jumped at the slightest noise, clearly scared, witless for his children's safety. I wonder if there were similar families in the other houses, huddled beneath blankets, stifling their children's cries, waiting for the storm to blow away, arrived by the water and dried meat. I stood up. You'd do better if you joined the camp. The soldiers are not letting anyone off the island for a few days. You can't survive here that long. The wife shook her head, grabbing her children at the bosom, and looked at me, and then his wife and the children. I guess he'd do whatever she said. We're gonna find a boat. He looked at her, and she nodded, crawling from house to house, dashing forward and then stopping. He led me back into the woods. He took me near the waterfront, and between 2 thick trees in a deep gorge that led all the way to the sea. Cleverly covered by grass and sand and rocks, he unearthed the boat and 2 oars. He helped me push it towards the water, pointing me in the right direction. The sea was very narrow here, and all I had to do was cross it, and on the other side I found a river which led inland. I waved as the boat pulled away, and he stood there a long time, waving back. For a moment, he put aside enormous responsibilities of protecting his family. Now he had to return. As soon as I had no need for the long oar, the waters were swift, the waves were high and then low, and it wasn't long before there was as much water in the boat as in the sea. The waves flashed at me, the white and swift, startling, carrying me away. On a spit of dry land in the middle of the sea, that was how they found me. They told me there was no sign of my boat, and I was unconscious and spitting on water. I was discovered by a group of villagers venturing far from the village. From their little village to where fishing was better. If they hadn't gone that far, they had been an hour late. I'd have died, exposed, cold, belly up, like a beached fish. If Ian had made it to the river, more by accident than by my own efforts. I woke up to a little room filled with smoked fish left out to dry on the racks. A single lamp hung from the roof on a long only space hook. It was in its weak, smoky light. I saw that everywhere was covered with fish. The only space left was where I was lying on a mat against my wall. The smell of fish got me crawling on the floor and emptying my stomach on the doorstep. They didn't ask who I was and where I was going while I was here. The only thing I asked was if I was strong enough to move on. These were dangerous waters, and I could be an escaped hostage. The last thing they wanted was a butler with a gun wielding militias breathing on their shore. If I was going to get out of here, I had to regain my strength. I slurped the thick corn porridge they gave me with superhuman concentration, and I went outside and threw up. I asked for more, my hand shaking. There were 4 people peering down at me. An old man seated on a rocky hand-covered stool, fair skinned, with hairs all over his face and growing like tendrils out of his nose, out of his nostrils and near his armpits and at the top of his singlet. A fat woman standing over him, the hair on her head white and knotted, and 2 silent men standing in the shadows behind the fat man, not saying much, but not much hair on their heads. A smoky lamp on a hook hung from the roof. The woman took the bowl from my hands and shook her head. No more. I slept for half an hour or so and didn't even notice this fish smell. When I woke up, I was strong enough to eat a whole fish, catfish, the whiskers on its intact face looking like the hairs to an old man's face. I told the old man I was a journalist and I was on my way to Port Harcourt. Port Harcourt, very far from here. He pointed with his hand, and from the way he pointed in the vague, uncomprehending look for me, Port Harcourt might have been on the moon. The others nodded. Can you help me? Everybody, one go Port Harcourt. You go ferry from Reykjavik. I'll come from Reykjavik. There's fighting going on there. Again, they didn't answer details, though surely they must have been aware of the fight. News traveled fast on the water, from island from creek to creek, boat to boat, hut to hut. They continued to stare at me in silence, and the land grew smokier above us, making my eyes water. It took a while for I to stretch something odd in the man comment. What do you mean? Everyone wants to go to Port Harcourt. Who else wants to go here? They looked at each other, their eyes expressing their debate whether to trust me, a stranger who had been washed up on the shore or not. I'm a journalist, you can trust me. The woman spoke first. She said a white woman was here 3 days ago, wanting to go to Port Harcourt. Was she alone? No, one man day with them. His name Nasolom, Isabel Flood, and Solemn, the wanted driver. The two had arrived in a boat, the woman's face blackened with charcoal, dressed in man's clothes, her hair covered in a hat. There was no hiding the blue eyes when she came closer, nor was there disguising the voice, the speech. She hadn't looked very well. Her arms were covered bug bites and rashes, and she looked weak. But she was determined to go to Port Harcourt at once. They spent the night there because they had arrived very late. They didn't say much about where they were from or who they were, but they did promise the villagers a lot of money if they would help them get to Reykjavik. And in the morning, from where they get the ferry to Port Harcourt, but then the fighting had broken out. Where is she now? Lieutenant Chief Ibram. Chief Ibram, yes, and placed not far from here. I looked around the little room, 3 faces staring at me. I tried to imagine the woman here, her life in the hands of Solomon and these simple fishing folk. Until now I had only thought of her as a subject, if I thought of her at all, but now, perhaps because of my weakened state, I found myself trying to imagine what must have gone through her mind. How did she manage to escape, coming so far only to discover the fighting at Reykjavik? But why didn't she go to the soldiers? I looked outside the forest with the abandoned boats on the water, a few thatched huts, and I thought what fate could possibly want with her on these oil-polluted waters. The forsaken villagers, the gas flares, the stumps and pipes from exhaust wells, and their heads caped at the left, shooting for the oil-scorched earth, and the ever-present pipelines crisscrossing the landscapes. Sometimes like tree roots surfacing far from the parent tree, sometimes like diseased veins on the back of an old troubled hand, and sometimes in squiggles like ominous writing on the wall. Maybe fate wanted to show her firsthand the carcasses of the fish and crabs and water brines that floated in the deserted beaches of these tiny towns and villages and islands every morning. Could well oil her husband was hoping to produce. Listen, you must take me to Chief Ibram now. He's a friend. I have to meet the white woman. They looked at each other and shook their heads. Chief Ibram, don't go. He ain't no day here anymore. He say he don't want to stay here anymore because of so much fighting, because of bad fishing. So where is he going? They all pointed in the same direction, northward. He went Port Harcourt, and that explained why they had sent a woman to him. To hitch her ride on his boats. It was her best chance to getting out of here. With the whole clan on the move, she could travel with them undetected. Damn, so that's where they're at, bro. We figured it out. That's where they've been at. Chickaway. Now we know, bro. Do we have time for another? We have time for another chapter. We're gonna do 1, 2. Yeah, just 2 to finish it off. No, 7, right? 7. I just did 3, 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I do this one, it'd just be 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of hot in here. I'm gonna take a little break and then I'll be right back. But damn, hey, now we know. That's wild. That's crazy.